in the discovery and what happened with Raymond Moody, everything came to a head. And then there was this piece of Angel Vause just out there.
Right.
What has it been like to bring this all together? I mean, today feels like it was a day that you were able to seriously bring this case on.
So the FBI never really gave up on it. They knew there were some problems with their statement when they took it back in May of 2022. They just had to dig to disprove it. There were many times in this case where we were down to our last thread, and they just said, we just want to pull on that. We want to enhance the video from the boulevard. We want to look at the cell phone data again. I mean, we would literally, multiple times, we were down to the very last piece of evidence. They just said we have to do even more. They looked for Angel Voss's, that 98 Explorer, which had been smashed into a little cube years before, but like everything that they could possibly find. Because they wanted to see actually if they could get some DNA from the Explorer for all these years later. Like literally every possible avenue they were following. And eventually they brought it to me and they said, we can disprove at least these three things. And those were the most robust charges that we had. So we brought them, and today she pled guilty to all of them, which was actually extremely satisfying.
Well, and she had to, because she pulled her plea deal, what was it, a week ago, 2 weeks ago now?
Yeah. She had to plead to all three, because we said initially it was just two counts. And the significance of that is each one carries 8 years. So before there was a maximum of 16. When the hearing did not go through, we said we're not just going to redo the same thing. So we insisted that she plead guilty now to the third count as well, which takes the maximum to 24.
And why did you take kidnapping? Like, as far as kidnapping goes, why did kidnapping, it got on, it got off? Like,
Right.
What is it about that charge that's been so difficult?
Federal crimes are much tighter sometimes in terms of what you have to prove than state crimes. There was an interstate aspect to the kidnapping charge. The entire crime took place within the bounds of South Carolina. But there are arguments to make that there was a nexus with some aspects of interstate commerce, but they would have been aggressive, supported by case law, but it would have been aggressive. And so had we gone to trial, we would have been aggressive. But in terms of negotiating this and the initial charges, this is what we felt most comfortable with.
So you made a very clear point in saying that phone went south.
Yes.
That Angel went south when she said she was going north. So the evidence proves that you got her going south. Was there a third person that she was handing this phone off to? Was this phone, what can you talk to me about how you know that phone was there and why she chose to go over there? Was she waiting for this crime to be committed? Can you give me anything that'll connect the dots right now?
Some of it's inferences, right? But what we talked about in court was we knew from the cell phone towers that were in the area. And cell phone towers basically take a 360-degree picture of where they are, but in thirds. So 120 degrees pointing in 3 different directions. So we knew the quadrant that the phone was in, and we knew the distance, the maximum distance it was from the cell tower. There's a little bit of a margin of error, but it would have been closer to the tower, not farther away. And so the tower was putting the phone south of the North Santee River. We knew that the pool yard, which is a boat landing just north of the Santee River, which was where everything had played out with Ray Moody and Brittanee. And so we knew that the phone had traveled south. And then the inference is there were only 3. There's never been an implication there's more than that third person that night in terms of the Moody Vause facts. And so the inference would be that it had to have been Angel who took it south, because Moody would have had to have stayed with Drexel.
But that phone stayed there.
Right.
Until it died.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your inference at that point about what we think happened to that phone?
Well, the inference is that Angel Vause traveled just south of the North Santee River with Brittanee's phone in the vehicle and remained south of the North Santee River until that phone was dead. After that, though, that was our information. There wasn't an independent way to track the vehicle or whatever. So that's why what we talked about in court was limited to that, because that's what the evidence showed. But we do know that the phone sat there until 11:58. And you can also say, you know this from your own cell phone. if you throw it in the water, it dies. So it wasn't in the river or anything. It was on land with somebody or thrown out somewhere until the battery died, around midnight.
Doesn't that bother you?
Yes.
Okay, then tell me what bothers you about that scenario.
You talking about the underlying conduct or the proof? Like the conduct bothers me a tremendous amount. That's why we charged it. Yes, because
yes. But what does bother you about that? What can you tell me about what bothers you about that scenario that she's sitting there with a phone? So did she get a phone call from Ray to come back?
I can't talk about what we haven't talked about in court already. We will address that at sentencing.
Okay. Angel's been lying on tape since 2011, 2011.
Right.
I mean, all of those the ones that we've listened to over and over again. But she was telling you that there was, or not you personally, but she was telling investigators there was a problem with Ray, and those fantasies were dark.
Right.
In your opinion, like, to prosecute this case, why did it take us this long to get where we are now?
When I learned of the Ray Moody Angel Vause scenario, that became the #1 priority. I can only tell you about, when I became involved and what happened then.
And was it smart to do this state proffer to get her out of the? Because they were able to make a deal with Ray, basically. They were able to make a deal with Ray,
right.
and then she was all yours to start dealing with on the federal level.
Well, the idea was that both of them would give a statement, and if the statements were coherent and were truthful, then Ray would accept responsibility, and their statements absolved Angel. That's the key part here. Mm-hmm. Like, their statement said that she didn't know and all this stuff. So there was not a thought that Angel would be charged after the Moody plea because of what their statement said. But then, as I said, the FBI, it didn't sit right, and so they started pulling the threads, and they said, well, this part of the statement we can disprove. And then it was this part and this part. So there was a thought when Ray Moody pled that if the statements they both gave, which were largely consistent, held, there wouldn't have been anything to charge her with. Mm-hmm. And that's why ultimately it was that was the lies to agents that brought her to where she is today.
And Angel, I guess my final thing that I just want to know, as far as what we're going to deal with at sentencing, can you talk to me about we just went through it with Murdoch, right? Like, Gurgle went, oh yeah, and we're going to tack on this, right. And I don't have to pay attention to the sentencing guidelines. Judge Baker made it very clear that you didn't have to hold to those sentencing guidelines. Right. So we're at 24 max. Do you have any leverage at this point to work with Angel to find out more facts on this case that you need to know, that you want to know? Are you still negotiating? Are you still working with Angel to see if she can give you more information?
If she wants to talk to us, then we'll listen to her. But we're largely satisfied that we know what happened. There are some details that I personally would like to know. I think the agents would personally like to know. But there's not any negotiating about that.
Was it a Bonnie and Clyde kind of situation? Is that what we're dealing with?
Which is what? I'm familiar with Bonnie and Clyde.
I mean, Bonnie and Clyde, like the idea that she was always complicit. She was always part of this. She
Oh.
was always planning on this experience with Brittanee and... Was she always part of this?
So it's interesting. Well, she was always obviously a part of it, right? When you're charging somebody or going to trial or whatever, I mean, you have theories and then you have evidence. And so the evidence could have broken a bunch of different ways. If you accept Ray and Angel's story that they told a couple of years ago, in the absence of evidence otherwise, you have their statements because you had Angel in the car, you had Ray in the car, and you had Brittanee in the car. And two of them are not talking, and Angel gave her version of events. So whatever Bonnie and Clyde, whatever you want to say, we put in court today what we could have shown in trial, and we're confident we could have shown in trial.
So more's coming out in sentencing.
Yes.
And the last thing is, and you know, this is driving me crazy, is that, I mean, I just asked Dawn this question. She's
Yeah.
convinced that there's more digging that needs to happen with the investigators. Are you encouraging them to continue to try and talk to Ray about any other possible victims, any other possible evidence that he was ever involved in anything else? Like, I don't know how to say that without putting, you know, but
Yeah.
but are you open to still investigating it, and are the investigators still working on whatever else might be out there?
I would very much like to sit down with Ray Moody. Yeah.
Are you going to get that chance?
I don't know.
Okay.